Hello everybody, this is the iFan channel here. So today I'm going to review to you guys the iPod Classic from 2007 and see how it actually holds up 17 years later. Over here I actually do have the 160 gig variant, and my friend actually gave me this iPod, so I did not really buy this iPod, so therefore I do not have a box to actually show you guys, but this is what the iPod looks like. Now I'm actually going to go over it. Now the 6th generation iPod Classic was first released on September 5th of 2007 alongside the 1st generation iPod Touch and the iPod Nano 3rd generation. Now unfortunately this iPod Nano is actually broken. I actually broke it because of a Tech Racks destruction style I actually did in 2015, unfortunately. But when it was first released, it actually came in two storage configurations, 80 and 160 gigabytes, and it actually came in two colors, silver and of course black. Now even though 160 gigs of storage might seem very little in today's standards, as the base iPhone 16 Pro Max comes with 256 gigs and the base iPhone 16 models come with 128 gigs, you have to consider this is actually in 2007, and even the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus have a max storage capacity of 128 gigs. Yes, you heard it correctly, about the same as the base iPhone 16 models. Even the iPad Air 2 from like 10 years ago only supported up to 128 gigs. And by the time the iPod Classic was actually released, the original iPhone only had like storage capacities of 4 and 8 gigabytes. And most computers only had like 80 or 160 gigs of storage. I'm not even joking. If you found any Dell Objectplex from the era, then you would find out many of them do have 160 gigs of hard drive storage. Now moving on, the iPod 6th Gen had two revisions. One was actually 6.5, which is actually revision 1, which was released in 2008, which actually added some new features such as the Genius feature, a thinner design, as well as 120 gigs rather than 80 or 160 gigs. And the revision 2, which is actually dubbed Gen 7, it was actually released in 2009, and it offered minor differences, which included the Genius mixes as well as the 160 gig base storage, and that was actually discontinued in 2014, which was only 10 years ago due to poor sales. During the iPod Classic's last production year in 2013, it was actually listed for around $250 for 160 gigs. But during the initial release in 2007, the iPod was actually listed for around $250 for 80 gigs, and it actually starts at $350 for the 160 gig variant, which is actually what I'm holding now. And according to Apple, 160 gigs does mean 40,000 songs, assuming one song is actually 4 megabytes. Now moving on to the screen, because the iPod Classic does have a 2.5 inch backlit display with a resolution of 320 by 240, which is quite okay at the time. Even though it kind of is pathetic in today's standards, it is quite okay. And unfortunately, there is actually no camera. And I do assume, but I'm not too sure, the iPod Nano 5th generation from 2009 did include a camera. And it was the only non-iPod Touch with camera support. Now, due to the fact this iPod Classic and its two revisions were sold for extremely long time, it actually sold alongside the original iPhone, the iPhone 3G, the iPhone 3GS, the iPhone 4, the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 5, the iPhone 5C, and the iPhone 5S. And it was only discontinued when the iPhone 6 and the Apple Watch were introduced. Now the reason why the iPod Classic actually offered 80 gigs, 120 gigs, and 160 gigs of storage as opposed to 128 gigs of storage, just like the iPhone and iPod Nano, of which both offer 8 gigs of storage, is because even though the iPhone and iPod Nano and iPod Touch offer flash memory, the iPod Classic offered the cheaper and more brittle mechanical hard drive. Now, due to the fact that mechanical hard drives are considered far more affordable than flash memory at the time, hence you actually do have like 160 gigs, and you could actually store in a ton of storage for less price than the original iPhone, because the original iPhone actually started at $499 on a 2-year contract, which meant you do have to pay more. Now, for the first time, the iPod Classic did not offer the front in polycarbonate plastic, and instead the front is actually made of anodized aluminium, which actually feels a lot more premium than polycarbonate plastic, such as the iPhone 3G and 3GS on the rear. And when you go to the back, you would actually see stainless steel, which unfortunately is actually a scratch magnet. As you can see, there are actually a lot of scratches, and let me show you guys on the iPod Nano, there's also a lot of scratches as well. So that meant unless if you're buying new, you would actually get scratches no matter what. And as for battery life, even though I did not test the battery life, Apple did promise about 36 hours of music playback and about 6 hours of video playback. Unfortunately, due to the fact the 160 gig hard drive is not fully ATA compatible, not supporting the 48-bit LBA in favor of a proprietary addressing method, therefore if you want to switch storage and stuff or even increase storage, it is going to be an arduous endeavor. And of course the iPod Classic does use the 30-pin connector as an adapter, which is quite antiquated in today's standards, but still it is quite useful. You can still find it at Apple stores, unlike the FireWire from the first two iPods, which are very much discontinued because the original iPod was released in 2001 and the second gen iPod was released in 2002. And guess what? Upon the original iPod's first release in the end of 2001, it only came in 5 gigs. Yes, 5 gigs of storage. Nowadays, like iPhones have 8 gigs of RAM, but the original iPod from 23 years ago only came with 5 gigs of storage, and a 10 gig option was actually released months later. So now why not, let's go over its quirks and features. Over here you would actually see the hold button, and what the hold button does is it actually does lock the scroll wheel over here. So if you want to hold, you cannot use the wheel anymore, unfortunately. And it is kind of synonymous with the power off and on button, because unfortunately there's no power on and off button, unlike the iPod Touch or the original iPhone. Over here where you do have a sleep button over here. And the iPod Nano, being much thinner, actually does have a much smaller hold button. Now, even though the original iPhone had a recessed headphone jack, the iPod Classic does not have a recessed headphone jack, and therefore you could actually listen on any 3.5mm headphone. And now let me show you guys how to use the scroll wheel. Now you actually go in a clockwise direction like this, and anti-clockwise to actually go up. And of course, if you want to click the music, just click this. And if you want to go back to the menu, then click menu. And so let me show you guys how the audio quality is. Unfortunately, the only speakers I have are the computer speakers over there, so I do have to use the computer speakers. But nonetheless, I'll show you guys the audio samples. Now pressing this does mean pause and play. And if you want to seek track, then you would actually go here. And if you want to change the position of the music, then press the middle button and actually scroll clockwise to move forwards and counterclockwise to actually move backwards. So this will take a while. And if you want to change the volume, it's simple. If you go clockwise, then of course the volume would go up. And if you were to go anti-clockwise, then the volume would actually go down. Now I'll return to the menu, and this is to actually return to the home screen on the iPod Classic. And unfortunately did not download any videos, but it does support video capability as well as photo capability, since I do believe the iPod Classic 5th generation, and also does support podcasts. And over here are actually the settings. You can actually go into settings. And here's the storage. As you can see, this iPod Classic does have a lot of storage. You could actually hover into the about. As you can see here, it does show some of the storage used. And if you want to go back, you could actually turn on and off shuffle and repeat and stuff. And you could actually customize the main menu as well over here. And you could even adjust the music menu as well, not just the menu. And of course you could even set the volume limit as well as the backlight, which I actually do believe is actually the auto lock. And you could even adjust the brightness as well. So here it is in its max brightness. And if you were to go to menu, you could actually see a lot more, like sound check, clicker and stuff, date and time, and sort by first, and even the language. And let me show you guys how many languages there are. Unfortunately, I do not see any Vietnamese. And if you were to go into extras, you would actually find clocks, calendars, contacts, alarms even, as well as games. Yes, there are actually 3 games here. I'm not sure if you could download any because I've not used the iPod Classic for like at least 10 years now. And as you can see, you could actually have a screen lock combination, which I do believe is actually a password. Yes, it is actually a password. And you could actually set the stopwatch. So why not? I'll show you guys some games. And there's actually iQuiz, Klondike, and Vortex. So why not? I'm actually going to play iQuiz to show you guys what a typical iPod Classic game is like. And this iPod Classic is actually tantamount to many feature phones, because unfortunately there are not many features, unlike the original iPhone, which actually had a lot more features even without the App Store. But in later iterations, it actually did include the App Store, as you can see on iOS 2 and 3. And that is even though the original iPhone had far less storage and did not have any expandable storage of any kind. So over here is the iQuiz game. Why not? I'm actually going to resume the game. Okay, so I basically did not earn money, but as you can see, oh shit. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at this, but in reality, I don't really care because I'm just showing you guys how the game works. And I'm just gonna exit, and over here it is. I'm now back to the menu, and unfortunately the battery is kind of low. I just don't understand, but I do think the battery has degraded over time. So thank you guys for watching. Please give a big thumbs up, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys soon.